Hello and welcome to The Sexually Satisfied Woman. I am your host, Eva Blake. In this series, I'm talking to a variety of experts who are uniquely qualified to discuss some of the most common challenges that women face in our sexuality. And over the course of this series, we're going to offer real practices and proven strategies to solve those problems, to boost your confidence, to ditch the shame, and create truly remarkable relationships so that you can have the sexual satisfaction that you deserve, even in wildly uncertain times. And I'm really thrilled to welcome today Ruby Ryder. She is a pegging expert, an erotica writer, and the host of a podcast called Pegging Paradise. So you can find her at peggingparadise.com. Welcome, Ruby.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Great. So I want to just start with this question. How did you come to be here in this life? You're hosting a pegging podcast and you're writing femdom erotica. How did you get here?
Well, if you take it back to the beginning, I was always, ever since I became a sexual being, ever since I became aware of my sexuality, had not had sex yet, but I did have access to some porn at my parents' house, which is really saying something because this was a long time ago. So this is before the internet, right? And I ran across Penthouse Forum letters. So this is only erotic letters. Well, you can't really call them erotic because they're pretty cheesy, really. But this was my source of excitement. So there was something about anal that just turned me on. I can't track it back to anything. I have no idea why, but I was kind of anally obsessed. Didn't really make any difference whether whoever was receiving or giving, as long as there was some anal action, I was excited. And then one day I come across this letter, and it was about two couples. The women had labeled themselves football widows because their guys were always at the bar watching football games. So they came home one day, and these women had strap-ons on, and they had footballs on the ground, and they made them bend over, pretend they were centers, and they pegged them, right? And the word pegging didn't even exist at that point, right? So this was an epiphany for me. Oh my God, I had no idea that you could do something like this. And the idea of it was so exciting that it took a hold and just didn't let go, like at all. And I was about 16 at that point. So, okay, I did what a lot of people do. I labeled that as weird and different and strange and probably forbidden, even though I wasn't raised real religious or anything like that. And I shelved it away, and I wrote stories about it, and I hid them in the back of my filing cabinet. And this continued. I got married twice. I did approach both husbands with this idea. They kindly but diplomatically said, no. And I felt badly enough still about it and ashamed of it that I shelved it again, and I didn't persist. I didn't have the self-confidence to say, hey, this is something that turns me on. Can we explore this? So after divorcing the second husband, and those weren't the only reasons I got divorced, but after divorcing a second husband, I was 50 years old. And I thought, if not now, when? So I took all those stories out of the filing cabinet, literally put them on the computer, because there were computers by then, and I started peggingparadise.com. And since then, I've just jumped down the rabbit hole. Oh my gosh. And really kind of how the whole thing started was, okay, I'm writing about it, I'm reading about it, I'm researching about it, but I haven't done it. So I researched all of the equipment that I would need. I got the equipment, and I put myself on the dating site Adult Friend Finder. So that has a whole section of optional questions that are all sexually oriented. You don't have to answer them, but you can. One of those questions was, describe your favorite sexual fantasy. Well, goodness, I'd been thinking about this for how many decades? And over those decades, what I really thought I was a writer. And I am a writer, but I'm so much more than that now. And so I wrote this short story, which to this day is up for view on my website. It's called Hard Times at the Hotel. And I told a story that had some female dominance in it, some spanking, some pegging. And the guys on the other end at Adult Friend Finder were all pretty much virtually raising their hand saying me, which was a surprise to me. I knew that I wanted to do this, but I had no idea that they wanted it done, much less that there was so much pleasure involved. So I found a guy, had a date with him, and the universe must have been smiling down on me because he was a hot fireman. I kid you not. So I got to check off 2 boxes at the same time. And I think that if I had to do over again, clearly I would start this so much earlier. But to have found this at this stage in my life is really fascinating for me, because at 50 years old, I finally find my niche, and I finally get to get really excited about all the stuff that I've been fantasizing about for decades.
I love this. I'm just grinning from ear to ear. My cheeks already hurt, Ruby. I'm just absolutely in adoration of, you're not the first person that I've talked to in this series whose story starts with, I posted an ad somewhere online and my erotic adventure really went to the next level. So I'm so thrilled for you. We, in a previous conversation, we talked about this piece, if not now, when, right? And you just told us essentially that the kinks don't go away. So what have you learned about this from yourself, your own experience, and talking to other people about the kinks don't go away?
Well, part of what the catalyst was to get me to explore this was I was at the time a big listener of Dan Savage's podcasts. And there was a young woman who called in. She was 24 years old. And she said, I'm into BDSM and I'm kinky and I'm just afraid that I'm not going to find anybody. And Dan called her back. He does that sometimes. And he said, so are you hot? How do you look? And she goes, yeah, I am hot. And he said, oh, are you kidding me? A 24-year-old hot young woman who is kinky? Please go explore your kinks, because they don't go away. They will come back. And you are sought after. There are so many men out there that would love to find a woman like you. So I took that and internalized all that whole message, and that is what sort of gave me the final push to get there. Since then, I'm definitely into BDSM. I identify as a dominant sensual sadist, and that in itself was quite a journey to realize that, to embrace the word sadist and things like that. But I've been looking at all this material and talking to people and doing all this for over 10 years. And I know that the kinks don't go away. In fact, if you push them down, they tend to come back with more force later. So it can feel really uncomfortable to embrace something that I had labeled bad, weird, different, strange, and all these different things. But it feels so freeing to do that when you finally do. I mean, I think the most important thing is for it to be safe and consensual. That's the most important thing, especially where BDSM is concerned. So I got to know the community. That's the first class I ever taught, because I teach about pegging. I do webinars, and the first in-person class I ever taught was at a meeting of a whole bunch of BDSM people in a restaurant in a back room, right? And then they invited me to one of their parties. So these two things kind of overlapped. But it's just so interesting when you finally let down those guards and you take a deep breath and embrace that and start thinking seriously, as opposed to keep actively pushing it away inside yourself. Because I realized, this blew my mind. I realized that when I get off and I masturbate, 99.9% of the time I am fantasizing about doing something to someone. And when I realized that, I went, okay, I guess I'm dominant. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, fantastic. How you really allowed your fantasy world to help you shape and understand who you are as a person, so that you can explore. So you talked about just a minute ago the stuff that gets in the way, right? It's different. It's weird. It's when we're talking a lot about anal play, there's a lot of shame or anxiety around it being messy, right? So what gets in the way of people exploring pegging?
Oh man, that is such a big question. I spent 10 years trying to talk to people about that. Okay, so from first of all, I use the pronouns giver and receiver when I talk about pegging, because I want everybody to feel included. And all the reasons why. So from a giver's perspective, what gets in the way, first and foremost, is the same thing that gets away from the receivers, which is myths and misconceptions. The most common one is most of the time the giver is not the one, so to speak, driving the bus for this. It's the receiver who either reads about it or discovers there is pleasure to be had with anal play. So they approach the giver, their partner, and the boom, knee-jerk reaction right off the bat, so incorrect, is, are you gay? So sexual activity is not connected to sexual orientation. The area of your body that you enjoy having stimulated has no bearing whatsoever on the gender you prefer to do the stimulating. But that is a knee-jerk reaction, and followed up really quickly with, okay, but if I do this to you, am I going to turn you gay? No. There's no magic button that all of a sudden makes somebody crave their own gender if they receive anal play. It's not the way it works. And it's not a real black and white thing, because when I first started my blog, I used to hammer away at that all the time. And I realized I was really doing a disservice to, the bisexual people. So I kind of backtracked on that, because I have found that sometimes receivers will have this tamped down by curiosity. And then when you start exploring pegging, maybe it can bring that to the surface. In all the years I've been teaching about it, I've gotten 2 emails from receivers who have said they approached their partner and their partner left them. Boom, just like that. And that's always horrifying for a sex educator. And then they both wrote me a couple of years later and said, okay, it's been a tough couple of years, but now I'm with the woman of my dreams and I'm so happy and thank you so much. It's like, whew. So that's one of the things, is this whole knee-jerk sexual orientation thing. But really, when you look at pegging, there is an imbalance of effort versus reward to a certain extent. Part of that exists, and this is so intriguing to me, part of that exists because fucking someone is hard. It's difficult. It takes strength.
A lot of energy.
It takes strength and balance and endurance and grace and multitasking. We don't have to worry about the multitasking because we strap it on and it's always hard. We don't have to have just enough fun to keep it hard, but not too much fun to have it end early, right? But all those other things are very real. And it's like an athletic event. And part of what happens, which is so cool about pegging, is you get a chance to experience sex from the other side of the bed. And you get to figure out what your partner usually does. Givers are usually kind of unprepared for this. It's a very steep learning curve. And they try it and it's like, oh my God, I'm using muscles I've never used. This is harder than I ever thought it would be, So it can put you off of it, maybe, but ideally what it can do is also give you such an appreciation for what your partner usually does when they fuck you. Understanding and compassion for their usual role. So that's from a giver's perspective, that's kind of that. And then from the receiver's perspective, there is that automatic sexual orientation thing. They usually are really worried about, what does this say about me? Also, they're very concerned about what other people will think, because there's that whole thing that our society does about masculinity, and masculinity involving a prescribed set of characteristics they're supposed to have, and more importantly here, things they're forbidden to do. Like do anything that resembles femininity or gay, which is so sad on the face of it, because that implies that those two things are less than. But moving right along here, they get concerned about people finding out. And even more than anything, they're concerned about what their partner is going to think. With good reason, because all these connotations are very, very strong. So what I did was I recorded a podcast speaking to potential givers, and I take them one by one through every single misconception and myth. I give them accurate information. I don't try and convince. I just talk about the different myths and misconceptions, give them accurate information, and above all, I emphasize the relationship. Because really what's happening when your partner comes to you and goes, hey, I want to explore this new cool sexual thing, is it's a gift of intimacy. It truly is. They're allowing you to know them on a deeper level. So no matter what you do with that information, it's a gift. It totally is. And one of the big things too is all the stuff connected with porn. The fears here can come from both sides, but usually on the giver's side, because pegging porn totally overrepresents feminization. So usually the receiver's dressed up as a woman, lots of verbal humiliation and degradation. Sometimes they're tied up, sometimes they're being beaten, BDSM type of stuff. Now, any of those kinks are awesome. If those are your kinks, then rock on. But they're not inextricably connected to pegging. But people assume that all the time. It's like, oh, I don't want to do pegging, man. I don't want to dress up like a woman, because that's all you've ever seen.
Yeah. So beautiful. I just so appreciate how you're able to unpack all these misconceptions so well. There's so many things I want to circle back around to, but to stay here in this idea, what we've seen in pornography, most of the images that I've seen around pegging that are really easily accessible on the internet, have like the largest dildos that I've ever seen, right? Mm-hmm. And so, one of the other messages that I see out there, but also that I have heard is, men who say like, in my experience, it has been men who are saying, I want something, right? Who I want this sensation. And they're like, I want the biggest thing possible. And the reality is that the human body actually needs time to soften and waken up and learn how, especially the anus, it needs to learn how to receive. Right. And so just this particular dynamic of how our bodies work. And it makes me think also of what you said earlier about the giver really appreciating, sex from the other side. And I was thinking about, for me, when I do wear a strap on, regardless of who I'm playing with, I have to learn how to move my body in a different way.
Yes.
Right. Because when I'm receiving, I move my hips side to side. And when I'm wearing a strap on, I have to move my hips forward and back.
That's so true. There's this beautiful role of the hips that's involved in fucking someone with a strap on for women or for givers. And it's sometimes it comes naturally, but many times it's something you really have to learn, because we haven't ever had one, right? And you watch any porn clip of any cock owner do that beautiful roll of the hips, and it's like, okay, I want to learn that. And people have asked me, so how can you learn how to do this? And the only thing that I can come up with, because belly dancing is side to side, that's not right. But those exercise hoops, the weighted ones that you can do the exercising with, that'll really get your hips moving all kinds of different ways. So that is helpful, but mostly it's just practice. I had to laugh when you mentioned about the biggest dildo possible, because clearly I teach those safety rules in my webinar about start small, but I call that your eyes are bigger than your ass. And it can come from both sides of the pegging equation. Sometimes the receivers have been fantasizing about this for so long that that's what they want to start with. It's like this competitive thing. It's like, I can take that. But there can also be givers where they really get entranced and really intrigued with the idea of doing this. And so they fantasize about a really big one too. Yeah, you got to start small. Respect your body, respect your ass.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to really appreciate what you said about intimacy, and how when we share our sexual fantasies or our sexual desires with our partner, that it really is, I'm sharing this with you. I'm peeling back the layers. I am unfurling. I'm inviting you in deeper, right? And that, especially when it is an element or a sexual activity that has so much, misinformation or myths, but also has a lot of like really weird shame stories in our culture, that it really does benefit us if we come to the table as, thank you so much for sharing this with me, right? Rather than,
yes,
running away.
Yeah, that's so important. sometimes it's really difficult to do because of a whole variety of reasons for the potential or hopeful receivers. Sometimes it's religious stuff. Sometimes it's goes back as far as parents being told, don't touch that part of your body. That's dirty. That's nasty. You know, that can have an effect too. But if at all possible, when you do talk to your partner about it, if you're the receiver, the hopeful receiver, to try so hard to let all of that shame go and just be matter of fact if you can, but even better, get a little excited about it. Do a little education. Say, wow, you know what? I was reading this thing on the internet and I found out that there's a spot inside me that's kind of like the inside of you, and that it can make my orgasms a crap load better. And I'm excited to explore this, and I really want you to explore this with me. Excitement, you know, excitement to share and to explore. Because you're right, there is so much shame associated with it. I mean, I started tagging that on the end of every single podcast I do. No shame. It's just, and what it makes me think of also is the guys, like bunch dudes hanging around, and they're talking and they're kidding with each other. And they make jokes. They make jokes about giving each other a hard time that many times involve being penetrated anally. I live for the day that when a guy says, I think I want to try this pegging thing, man. I think I'm interested in this. And his buddy says, dude, that's gay. That his friend will go, and? Because that's how I feel about it. It's like, okay, everybody gets to choose their sexual orientation, and, you know, what are you saying here? Because we're all the same, we're all fine, we're all good, all the orientations are good, and we all get to choose. So that's the world that I'm working towards.
Yeah, yes, me too. And may these conversations continue to move us in that direction as we create new culture around sexuality. So my question for you is, you know, what advice do you have for the women who are watching this, right? Whose partner maybe came to them in the past, or there's a potential that they may come to them in the future and say, I want to explore this. I want to explore anal play, or I want to explore pegging. You know, what do you have for women where this is, maybe they're feeling a little anxious about this, or it's a new topic. It hasn't actually shown up in their home yet.
Well, it's not at all unusual to have some fears about it because of all of those misconceptions and myths that we talked about. So first, educate yourself in that regard. And that's exactly why I made that podcast 112, which has gotten rave reviews. Oh my gosh. And the other thing is, education is really empowering. I know that there are potential givers out there who are the type of people where they just want to get it all right, you know, and they have fear and anxiety because they don't know how to do it. And it's like this whole new thing, and they're going to feel awkward, and then they just have a lot of fears or anxieties because of that. The best way to deal with that is education. Because once you learn a lot about it, you kind of know where to start, you know what to expect, you know tips and techniques, and all these different things. So I would absolutely recommend that. But on a more basic level and on a more maybe emotional level, I would really encourage women who have been approached about this or are thinking about it to just open your mind a little bit as far as getting out of the box about accepted sexual things. There are so many amazing experiences out there awaiting you. And if you explore it and you don't like it, then you've explored it and you don't like it. And even an exploration that you both discover you don't like can be bonding and can make you closer because it's something you tried together and explored. Maybe you'll look back at it and laugh and say, ah, we tried that thing, right? But this has the potential, so much potential, to help you draw closer together. Because I explained about the one side of it, about the givers learning what that was like to fuck somebody. Well, it goes both ways. And the receivers, what do they learn? Oh my gosh, they learn how important foreplay is. They learn that it's not 20 seconds, okay, are you ready yet? And then shove it in. They learn it's a whole part of sex itself. in and of itself. There's like a whole act of the play, so to speak. And they also learned that penetration's kind of intense. And maybe penetration night was not every night, you know, and how important lube is with anal play, stuff like that. I can't tell you how many letters I've gotten from couples who have said, this has brought us to a whole new level of intimacy. Because when you learn about your partner's usual role, you've got understanding and compassion, and that deepens intimacy. And I feel compelled to continue that and say, okay, I've gotten a lot of emails that way, but that is not necessarily how it has to be, because we're all different. And I wrote this big article about pegging and intimacy, because what I wanted to get across for the hopeful receivers is that this is not something that is like bowling. You bowl, I bowl, let's go bowling, right? It's not like that. There's a fair amount of intimacy involved, which is why you're not going to see, you know, pegging hookups on Tinder or things like this. This just really doesn't happen all that much. But at the same time, even though you're not going to see that, I totally lost that train of thought. And that was going. Oh, okay. I got it back. Okay.
Great.
So even though there is this intimate part with pegging, and this is a really important part of it, that's not the way it is all the time. All these people were cheering me on with this article and saying, yes, 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 intimacy, pegging, awesome. And then this really brave man comes on the comments and says, okay, that's how it is for you guys, but it's not really like that for me. Because my kink, and this was on a BDSM kinky website, my kink is to be treated kind of like a thing, like I'm an object for someone's pleasure. So if there's any intimacy between me and the person who's pegging me, it kind of ruins it for me. So I just want to put that out there, because there is no, this is the way it's done, right? I mean, pegging can be done any way you want to do it. Pegging can be one more way to sensually make love with your partner. Even though why you wouldn't want to tie him up and beat him first is beyond me, but that's me.
This brings us to a really great element of why someone might want to do this, right? This space of, is this for just the specific experience? I've never experienced this before, or do I want this to be a fundamental part of my relationship? Can you talk about that?
Yes. So for me, first of all, from my perspective, what I love about it is, I mentioned I was dominant. I love having the control. I love that power exchange. I love giving my partner pleasure. There's something really heady about just sort of being able to send your partner to the moon and leaving them a trembling pile of flesh, that they're so blown away that you have sent them to this place. So that's a big part of it. And from a more basic part, I totally get now why there's so many amateur porn videos that are focused like doggy style, and the person who's doing the fucking is focused the camera right down on the action. I get that now. It's really fun. It's beautiful. It's awesome to watch. So there's that. But there's also the turning things on its head. I've always been a bit of a rebel. So just kind of taking the reins in that regard and being the one in control and flipping the script, if you will, is really satisfying for me. And the pleasure part, the giving the pleasure is huge for me. It really is. I enjoy that so much. So it can feel, so expanding that out, for other people, for other givers, it can feel really empowering. Sometimes there will be givers who tap into this level of dominance and enjoying that control that they never knew was there, and they can really start enjoying that. So there's that can be a benefit. And I've also heard about receivers who, once they explore pegging with their partner, they kind of soften. And I was even asked when I was doing a presentation one time at a conference, and I took questions afterward, and this man says, "Have you heard about men who receive pegging being more peaceful?" And I thought, peaceful, that's an interesting word. Haven't really heard that, but softened, yes, absolutely softened. So I think from a receiver's point of view, there's so much to be gained, because I go back to the society's expectations of men. and not allowing them to be vulnerable. And in my opinion, vulnerability is essential for anal penetration. You cannot get around that. So in my world, what I see is it kind of helps men tap into this area that society has never allowed them to, hopefully within the safety of their partnership, so they can be vulnerable, they can open themselves up, they can allow that openness and that expression of emotions and things. Sometimes pegging can cause that to arise. It can cause emotional reactions to happen, a big welling up of emotion and even tears. Same thing for women who have the internal stimulation that can bring that up as well. So I guess the way I'd phrase it is, of course I think pegging can save the world, but I think the way I'd phrase it is that it allows receivers to be more whole people. This is a whole side of them that society will not let them have. And I know I'm making sweeping generalizations here, but for the most part, it's true. So for them to allow that opening and that softening and that vulnerability is such a beautiful thing. In fact, when I do pegging, there is an expression that my partner has that is a mixture, like when you first penetrate them, it's a mixture of awe and surprise and complete vulnerability. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. This is why I like positions where I have eye contact, and for me it's like crack. It's like, give me that, because it's so beautiful.
Yeah, this piece that you're saying, the surprise and awe and intimacy and possibility, you know, whenever, in my experience as a sexological body worker, working with anyone's genitals or self working with my own genitals, sometimes when we get to a new sensation, right, or we touch ourselves in a new way, it can elicit all kinds of emotions, right? Because this is new. I'm experiencing myself in a new way. And when we are with someone else, it's like, wow, they are seeing me potentially in a new way, right? So there's all kinds of, you know, just blowing open the back door, if you will, on all kinds of possibilities for what this might now means for me personally, if I'm experiencing, or what it can mean for us together if we are in partnership. And I think that's a really valuable thing, regardless of what kind of genital constellation that we have, right? That we all have this possibility of being in this moment, like you described, awe and amazement and wow and appreciation and connection, right, in the same moment.
Yeah, and I think so much of that is all about allowing yourself to open and having, and it's funny because so many people define vulnerability as weakness. Like if you take a military definition of vulnerability, it's weakness, right? That's not the way it is in interpersonal communications. It actually takes so much courage to open yourself up and allow that risk of exposure and openness with your partner. That's why this is typically something that's done with partners as opposed to just hookups and things. So the emotional aspect of this, there's so many similarities between stimulating a woman internally and stimulating a man prostate-wise. So in my own journey, the whole G-spot thing, which I don't like calling it that anymore. I call it the internal clitoral stimulation and external for a whole bunch of reasons. Nonetheless, I tried to find that spot in myself and wasn't impressed until the day I had a guy that I was seeing, and he was a geek, and he researched online about how to do this stimulation. So we used to get together for these wild hotel sex things. We lived far apart. We'd meet in the middle and just have like 24 hours. So we'd already made love a couple of times, and then he starts doing this, and I'm all relaxed, and it started feeling good, and then it started feeling really, really good. And then it was feeling really good, and then boom, I am in tears. Totally unexpected. He sees what's happening. He stops what he's doing. He comes up to the top of the bed, takes me into his arms and says, "Just let it out, honey," which was the perfect response. He held space for my emotions. He didn't make it all about him, and he made me feel safe so that I could let that out. Cried for just a little bit, and then he kind of looked at me and said, "So what was that?" And I said, "I don't know." And we both kind of chuckled about it. it did not dissuade us from further exploration further on. I can't honestly remember whether it was the same hotel visit or a subsequent one, but the second time I remember there was a little bit of emotional reaction, but not a lot, and I wanted him to keep going. And the third time I was squirting. So I tell that story every time I teach a class, a beginner's class, because the same thing can happen with prostate owners. And it's even more important because of the whole societal thing about guys not supposed to show the emotions, not supposed to have tears. So I charged the givers with handling it as well as that guy did with me. Because what you don't want to do is go, oh my God, you're crying. What did I do? Did I hurt you? Oh my God. You need to just hold space for them because they are at their most tender and most vulnerable. And I tell the receivers, you're not broken. This happens sometimes. It's really okay. And that to me speaks so eloquently of the depths that you can get to and the stuff that comes up that's really unexpected. And it also is part of the reason why I really like the idea of it being done in a partnership as opposed to just a fly-by-night kind of have some fun thing. Because these things can come up and they're really tender. They're beautiful in their tenderness.
I just want to keep going on this element of tenderness. I love the moments that we can have in sex play where we can get to tenderness in ways that feel really empowering and enjoy with full enjoyment, right? Where we can have these moments that you described, where we can have a big release of emotions because our prostate is being stimulated, and we can have wild, raucous, like tiger sensations too, where we want everything to feel good and we want to be on fire everywhere. And I love that in the course of this conversation on pegging, we're able to hold that both of those, that full spectrum is possible with this particular activity, and that the full spectrum of relationship is also possible with this particular activity. So I just really want to thank you so much for bringing that, because as you said, there's so much misinformation here on this subject. So I just want to thank you so very much for unpacking that for us. So Ruby, we have to leave it here. I want to thank you again so much. It was a real joy to connect with you. I look forward to another really rich conversation with you in the future. And to all of our viewers, please come back tomorrow for another expert conversation and exploration of sexual satisfaction. Thank you so very much.